Today's interview is with a very dear human being to me that I have met on, I believe it was my first trip to Bali when I ended up in your restaurant, which is called Living Food Lab. You're the co-founder of a vegan and focusing on raw vegan, healthy vegan foods restaurant. And I was just hanging out there a lot and I was working there a lot. And that's how we basically met. And today I would just love to have you with us and share a little bit of your wisdom. So Pauliina, would you love to tell us a little bit of who you are?
Oh my goodness. It's always such a kind of multifaceted question. But who I am this morning. So This morning I'm feeling joyful. We already shared a few laughs and that set like the mood for me now. And I've been very much in my mother role in the past few years. And it's actually an interesting story, and I did not know this was going to come up. But 3 years ago, I had my womb removed for medical reasons. And ironically or interestingly, that was when I really entered womanhood and motherhood. And I say ironically, interestingly, because I was surrounded by a lot of people who spoke the language of the womb is the center of womanhood. You need a womb to be a mother, like a physical womb. You need to connect to the womb. And I had quite a lot of worry about having such a key part of my body removed. But actually, that's when I really stepped into this motherhood role even more. And my kids are now, let me get this right, because they were joking with me just a few days ago about their birth year. So they're 17 and 18. And I'm loving the opportunity that the pandemic has provided us to really reconnect as a family, because they have been home a lot more than they would otherwise at that age have been. And also then with Living Food Lab, I have liked to say that I am the co-owner. The founder was Avara Yaran. I just want to clarify that and give credit to Avara, who founded it. But I'm the co-owner together with my husband and the director. And I usually sign off that mama and owner at Living Food Lab. So we have a very maternal energy, us managers and directors at Living Food Lab.
Yeah. Wow. You know what I really love? Oops, I'm hearing some backflash, but I think it's good now. Yeah. What I really love is you just went straight in. And that's what I'm enjoying about doing these interviews, that I'm having people here which are, like, well, I'm this and that, I'm this and that. No, we're going straight to the core of something. And you just pop in a story of you're having your womb removed. Super vulnerable. Thank you for that, first of all. So you're a mom. You have been on a plant-based diet. You're a vegan, and you're the co-owner of a vegan restaurant. Now, what I would love to know, and what we've talked about in person before this interview a little bit, is if we use the term activist, because I consider myself an activist since I am active for something. I'm active for animal rights, for human rights as well, for the planet. And I'm also very active for LGBTQIA, for queer people, this moment in time. And I would love to ask you, if you see yourself in this archetype of an activist, what are you speaking up for?
I'm not sure what is the archetype of an activist. The dictionary definition makes it too harsh, in my opinion. It's about something that is radical, extreme, a bit violent against something established. For me, I view activism as any action from gentle and subtle to extreme and radical, whatever is extreme and radical, because that's a sliding scale as well. And we have we're all on a different dot on that scale. So what for me is radical will not be radical for my idea of a radical. Anyway, if we look at it as a scale of subtle to radical, it's any action, positive or negative, taken, which is also subjective, taken towards a cause. So for me, I think that the activism manifests as love. It's an energy that I choose. So love is one of those. And it's also concrete steps taken towards improving the condition of animals, the planet, mental health, and general wellness and well-being.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that you see this very much as a holistic perspective, and the foundation of it all is the energy of love, right? And how love manifests and how love is put into action, that's a variation on this scale as well. So two scales, one, the amount of extremism and the amount of fire and engagement in the way we are active for something, for a bigger cause, and then also the foundation of it. And you're speaking into a super, super sensitive topic right now that I want to open up more now spontaneously with you, is looking at activism with love, or coming into activism from love. Because what I'm observing, and why I've started these series actually of these interviews, and I'm sitting here now with you, is because we observe that there is this strong fire energy, this strong engagement energy in activism these days. And it's just very much creating resistance, because it comes from guilt, from shame, from judgment, from fear maybe, and from anger. And so what I would love to ask you during your time where, or from the moment on where you consciously think back and you remember, this was an initial moment for me where I started speaking up or putting it into action. Do you remember that moment? Would you like to share?
Yes, I do. And it's a moment that has been with me since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I lived in Belgium at that time. So I am from Finland. My parents are Finnish, but we lived in Belgium when I was a child. And I was in the playground and I saw a child being bullied. And it was my immediate reaction to go and help that child. The child was on the ground, so I was kneeling by him and just giving comfort, and also like fending off other people, telling them to leave this person alone. And that's where this sense of wanting to see a just world, see justice and fairness and kindness shown towards other people, really, like that's where the seed was in me. It's not like that's where it was planted, but that's where I took the first step towards doing something towards justice and a kinder world in the playground. And that led on then to it eventually ended up being so that I was the one who was bullied throughout my school years. So I was both somebody who was popular and somebody who was the point of jealousy and envy and being bullied. So I did suffer a lot from it, with extreme headaches and nausea and just dreading going to school. But it made me a very strong person, because I had to sit in classrooms and know that there were people there who were talking about me behind my back and being mean and spreading lies. And just that's something that stuck with me. Like, we're watching a series on Netflix now, my husband and I, an Icelandic Netflix series. And there's a little child there who's bullied. That is not at all the main thing about that series. It was a side incident, but for me to see this little child cruelly spoken to by other children, it rips my heart into pieces. And that's why, as an activist mom, when my kids have been bullied, and I'm not saying my kids were angels, but there are some kids who are particularly raw in their negative expression, that just fires me up. It's like, it's so painful to watch. So that's one form. That's where it all started, and it led up to then. I'm really fast forwarding, but I ended up at the Department of the Unit of Human Rights at the Foreign Ministry, straight out of having graduated from university. I majored in international relations, and I studied peace and conflict research. So I landed basically my dream job right away. And it was a 6-month traineeship. And there I was writing reports on human rights violations around the world, and really exposed to like indescribable cruelty. The type of violations that like, we don't hear about on the news. And going home with this as someone very young and trying to just deal with everything that I had just like read my whole day reading through, like human rights abuse. And I would download to my husband and try to minimize on the horror, but I had to. Like that was then how I was processing to maintain my mental health back then, to just like talk about it, share like, this is what's happening in this and this country, and it's horrible, and so on. And I came to a point then when I realized that actually I don't want to continue in the foreign ministry, because it was just writing reports. I felt that it was not going anywhere, and I saw the side of politics even in Finland where it's trading, and it wasn't the kind of action that was making the world better from my perspective. It was very slow, bureaucratic, and based on self-advantage to a large extent. So I went to an NGO then, the Finnish League for Human Rights, and immediately there felt like there was much more of a ground to get positive change done. And so then I was working on anti-racism project, which was also something close to my heart. And I thought I was going to have a career in human rights. That's where it had, from my childhood, kind of been groomed to become a diplomat. And I thought that that's what the direction I'm going in. But then my husband got a job in China, and for us it was a no-brainer to move, because I had actually applied for a job in China from my husband in 2018, that we met in a job interview, and I ended up working for him, and we were engaged within the month.
Anyway, within the month.
Yes. My dad was like, Pauliina, how could you with your boss? But then they met him and they were like, we love him, he's so wonderful, and he's the ideal son-in-law. Anyway, so moved to China, and at that point I was writing my PhD in the human rights between Finland and China, coincidentally. So then I go to China, and I'm like, the company my husband was working for was like, your wife has to be careful, right? She can't be going around talking about human rights in China. And this was in 2001. And so I was scared. Like I thought, okay, my phones are tapped, they're probably on to me, and I would be like really cautious. And I ended up meeting interesting people who were working in the field of human rights there, journalists, and it was very interesting. But I realized that I'm not a researcher. It was so boring to read and write, and I was like, this is not my cup of tea. This is not where I can best make a change. And why am I doing a PhD anyway? Because I think my dad will love me more. And so when I told him I'm doing my PhD, I thought it was going to be like a meltdown. But he was like, oh, okay, sure. I'm like, oh, so you still love me? I'm really shorting it down, but but you still love me, although I'm not doing a PhD. He's like, of course, I love you no matter what. So anyway, I stopped that, felt so much relief, and then really focused on the work I was doing at an orphanage in Shanghai. So I was going in to volunteer and just give love to these babies. This morning, as I was thinking back on it, I remember there was such a bad smell at the orphanage. And going there, you had to go through security, and it wasn't like easy to get in to orphanages at that point. And just the coldness of the rooms and the wrought iron beds and the babies just crying in their like pee and feces, and it was just, the smell was awful. But I kept on going back, and then eventually I got connected with somebody who was heading an organization called Half the Sky, and so then I started to I took on this project of making these U-shaped pillows, soft pillows for the babies. They were called cuddles for various orphanages in China, so that the babies, instead of lying on the floor, could be snuggled into these U-shaped cushions. So they already could feel some warmth and softness from that.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
At that point, yeah. And then also I was fundraising for children living under the poverty level for both their medical and their educational needs, and really got to see what poverty is like really what it's like when you live under the poverty level in Shanghai.
That hits hard, doesn't it?
I consider, it's very humbling, especially in Shanghai, where you have you've got the main roads with all of their Versace's and high street labels, which I couldn't give less about. Is that correct? I couldn't give less. Well, I don't care about them. And then you go off into the side streets, and you go deep into these deep community networks, where if you go in, you can so easily get lost. And it's just all of a sudden everything is like very small and compact and tight and low and squashed together. So it was, that for me was a type of activism as well.
Very much so. And to me, thinking of the poverty that I faced, which I don't feel like it's comparable, but let's not compare anyway. Dealing with poverty and then having this calling within of I desire, or I would love to see change here, and I would love to have a little bit of impact here, so that this poverty rate go down and people can live at least in, where does comfort start, but at least closer to comfort and to health. What I would love to know, I didn't know all of this about you. That's really interesting to me. That's why I was dead silent. I was like, whoa, that's beautiful, very deep. What I'm now curious about is, how did animal rights and veganism find its way into your life?
There was since I was young, we lived in Belgium, which is like a culinary center. I was that person who ate everything, and it was like my thing to collect culinary experiences and eat strange things, including all kind of land, sea, and air life. And in my university years, I tried to go vegetarian unsuccessfully many times. And it was, the real turning point for me was 2013, when I did Elena Love's raw food chef training course in Bali. And my kids and husband were there as well. They did a part of the training as well. And after that, I just went to Singapore. We were living in Singapore at that point. And I set up Raw Inside Out, and I was doing vegan food training and cooking classes and just sharing. And that was paired with an overall life transformation. So when we moved from Shanghai to Singapore, I was still in my 30s crisis, which hit me very hard. And I was burnt out. At that point, I had two very young children whom I had given birth to in Shanghai, and I was just so lost. And moving to Singapore, I just took time off to meditate, and in meditation during a 6-month period, I heard that my calling in life is to facilitate people's path to healing. So I studied alternative therapies, and that led me to huge changes in my diet, and then to veganism. And it started off from a health perspective, and now it is so ethically based. So now it's really about, because the health is now sort of automatic. And since then I did 7 more months of study with the Matthew Kenny Culinary Academy, and trained to become a vegan chef. And just to clarify, I'm not a raw vegan, so I eat raw and cooked food, and I'm like all across the board in that sense, but it's all kind. There's no cruelty. And so it was like a pairing of the alternative therapies and the vegan food, and that also really led to a much deeper spiritual connection and an understanding of the spirit within everything. Which is why Bali is so great.
Because the spirit here is praised and focused on a lot. I see that. Well, I find it so interesting because I came from the animal rights perspective, but there are all of those people that, like go into veganism that come through some sort of life transformation. I feel it always has something to do with I'm shifting into a new stage of my life, or into a new phase, or into a new state of being. And what I'm observing, let's put the mental health struggles aside. I want to get to them in a moment. But for the rest, what I'm observing, when people start opening up towards alternative therapies, towards healing ways of eating, the beauty, and as you say, the spirit comes in, like the spiritual aspect of I'm growing as a human being, or as a being, and I'm connecting to other beings differently. So also relationships start shifting in my experience when we start changing our diet. And I find that so beautiful how interconnected all of this is. And now we're having this thing that I notice on myself, looking back on my past self, with this really strong fire within me as an activist. And you described that as well. And I was in a burnout at some point due to my activism, or partially due to my activism. And you described the burnout as well. And then you said in deep meditation, something came up for you that initiated this shift, right? So what I would love to ask you, for everybody who's watching this and who's listening this and who can relate to, like, I feel drained, or I feel powerless, or maybe even hopeless in my mind and in my body, wherever it sits, what like tips or what things would you love to have had a long time ago that everybody who's listening to this now can start looking at and practicing or integrating?
Well, first of all, I don't regret that I had the burnout, because that was the lesson that I needed. And it's shown me what's too much for me. So for me at that time, it was too much to have 2 babies in Shanghai, which it was also very polluted. So we were constantly ill. We were so sick. And also the nature of the work, I was emotionally very involved in it. And I was doing basically 3 volunteer jobs. It was all volunteer. I got no salary from that, but I was working around the clock for the babies in the orphanage, and the cushion project, and 4 actually, because then there was another organization for the educational needs, and then the medical needs. So I had too much on my plate, and I spread myself too thin. So the lesson would be choose a cause, and recognize when you start to feel burnt out, and take care of yourself first. Self-care is a big topic of mine, and that's why now I've started this. I'm in the process of creating a women's wellness and well-being platform to really encourage women. This is one aspect of it, to take care of yourself. And that's why I take time off for myself, so that I can better care for others, so that I can be in a better space. And it's never a selfish thing to do that. It's quite the opposite. It's when you put that time and energy into taking care of yourself, you are much better positioned to help others, because you have more energy, and also start to recognize that, oh, I'm nearing that point where I'm getting tired. I had better pull back now and not keep on pushing myself. And also, I'm lucky now that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who understand that kind of language. But if you are in a situation where people don't understand that I need to take, if you're in a very go, go, go environment and push yourself and keep going harder, it's like in yoga classes. Some teachers will push you too far and you get injured, and others will be, you know what, like Adrienne, like find what feels good, and do it at your own pace. The best pace is your own pace, so that you can then be a better activist and do so from a space where your mental health is stable. Of course, sometimes we're hit, especially with animal rights and human rights issues, with videos and information that is really hard to take on. For me, I feel like I have enough information at this point that I don't need to look through all the videos.
Same.
And so I don't do that anymore, because I know that it's just going to depress me so much, and it's going to bring my energy down. So I also choose what information to take on board. So that's another one. Limit. Find what is your healthful limit of staying up to date with current news without it depressing you, so that you are active in the mind also and are able to like stay current in, okay, what's happening in the animal rights world, for example. And also to be open about how you're feeling with other activists or your family. To share about it is not something to be embarrassed about. Perhaps you've grown up in a culture where it's good to be strong and not to show emotions, and to be an activist you have to just keep on fighting. But to recognize that it's okay, like this was too much and I need a break, and I'm going to let my family, co-workers, fellow activists know that, and through that hopefully set an example also, so that as a movement, we can all come from a healthier space.
Wow. Yes, to all of that. Well, that's really valuable. Like, to me it is, and I know that it is for everybody who's watching to this, especially the part of self-care is not an ego-based thing, because it allows you to show up even more with more presence, with more love, with more compassion. And these are the foundations of activism. Like, anyway, love, compassion, care. You mentioned that you're working on something. You're setting up a support group or a whole system. I sense that this is going to grow big. Would you like to tell everybody who is like, oh, that sounds interesting to me, how they can be in touch with you easiest, or through what social media accounts they can reach you and connect with you?
Yes, I would love to. And I'm just pulling up a quote first from my husband. Let me see if I can quickly find it, because last night when I said that I'm doing this, he said, because I said it was on mental health, he said, you have to be an activist or you will go crazy. And I thought that was interesting. It made me laugh. But the more I think about it, the deeper it is. Because if you're not taking action towards your cause, don't you go crazy? Kind of like, you know, there's an imbalance and an injustice, and you just sit with it, and the feelings are simmering inside, and you're holding on to that anger, turning that into positive action in a way that's helpful. So
that's powerful.
So anyway,
can you say it again? Can you read it again? That's so powerful.
So, okay, you have to be an activist or you will go crazy.
I love it. This is so good. This is so good. I might use that as the title of this podcast and reference him in the
You can do that. Yeah.
Powerful. Wow. Thank you for
and
that.
So then before our 40 minutes on Zoom, thanks, husband. He always says the funniest thing. So with wisdom, anyway, another topic. So I am currently working on Home of oh my God, I forgot the name. Home of Wellness. Well-being for the whole being. It's only because I've got both well-being and wellness, because they're both very interesting words with their own like set of definitions, and they're often they're interlaced, but they're not quite the same. So I'm actually really looking into the difference between well-being and wellness and where they overlap. So I chose to use both. Home of Wellness, well-being for the whole being. And it's firmly rooted in practices, experiences, beliefs that I've had throughout my life that have taken me to the point in 2013 when I started to study the alternative therapies and veganism, and bringing together body, mind, spirit tips for how we can better nurture and nourish our body, mind, and spirit, and view ourselves as a whole being that is composed of many elements, many life experiences, many moments in time. So that's why when somebody asks me, how are you now? If given the opportunity, I like to say, how am I now in this moment? And yeah, it's going to start off with vegan recipes for strong immunity. So this is a course that we filmed in Bali with our Living Food Lab cooks and baristas, and we've added written text and supportive material to that, and we'll be launching that then on 1/11 or 11/11. We're still deciding what's the best date for that, but the wheels are deep in motion, and it's just a wonderful, joyful, creative process to be in that now, and finally be finding like my voice to bring this.
I remember we talked about that.
This out. Yeah. So it's also a type of activism. If we look about positive, well, I said before positive or negative, but in this case, positive steps towards wellness, well-being, which includes that self-care aspect very strongly, that would be relevant for any activist.
I agree. How do people connect with you so that they are updated when it comes out?
So the best way is through my Instagram, which is raw inside out, RAW inside out.
I'll put that in the show notes and the comments linked.
Yeah, that's the best way at the moment. And from there will eventually be a link to Home of Wellness.
Beautiful. So if you love the same way I do and you get lost in Pauliina's words and her stories, go and follow her on Instagram so that you're updated about her personal life, and then further down the road about Home of Wellness. That's the name, right?
Yes.
Beautiful. So go and connect with her there. I am, and I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you're hopping on the Pauliina Instagram train as well. That was cheesy as fuck, okay? Oh my God. Wow. Well, Pauliina, I really want to thank you for your time today to spend this here with us and to share this deep immersion into your wisdom and this vulnerable sharings. And I also want to speak an open invitation to you personally, as well as everybody who's listening. I've been working on a new masterclass, which is also a 360 holistic health masterclass, mainly focusing on supporting activists to generate more energy within and to come into activism from love, compassion, and care. And inside of that masterclass is a wholesome experiencing that's awaiting you. We are diving into a breathing session combined with a movement session and ending with a meditation session. So for you, the moment that we're recording this, the masterclass is not online yet. It will take place live on the 24th of October, but from then on, it will stay online for as long as it can. So everybody who's listening to this, including you, Pauliina, are warmly welcome to join that experience with me and to really create a new foundation for activism based on love and on compassion. Yeah. So one last thing.
Wonderful. You're really onto, yeah.
Thank you, my love. One last thing. Just when you like what you're seeing here, support us, support me in sharing this with your friends. Do the like thing, do the subscribe thing if you're watching it on YouTube. And I also often appreciate when you share it with someone personally. I have a couple of people that follow me that are like, hey, I forwarded your email or I forwarded this podcast to my friend. And that's what I love most, because it really stays in a human direct connection. So go ahead and do that. Leave a like and share it with a friend or two or 20 if you have so many good friends. That was it for today from my side. Do you want to add any last words before we close, dear Pauliina?
Well, I want to thank you, because it's actually because of the way that you've now been talking about activism that I've realized that is I am more activist than I had realized before, because I was comparing myself to all these vegan activists who are so out there and so prolific, so well versed in their capacity to speak with people on the street, going to slaughterhouses. And the wonderful realization is that I've had is that we don't all have to be doing the same thing, and we shouldn't be doing the same thing, because we need to be connecting and sharing across all forums and within our own spaces in ways that feel comfortable to us, so that it comes off as genuine and real, and in ways that we're able to subtly infuse and intervene and make positive change that is a loving and compassionate way from us, from our heart. Be the activist you are meant to be. Do you.
Cannot stop and end this podcast with any other words. Do you, be you. Thank you so much, Pauliina. And thank you to all the listeners. See you soon.
Thank you.